Hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us on this webinar today. My name is Sean Gores. I'm a technical sales engineer with OpenVPN, and we're going to start in a minute. Our focus today is how to configure access server for ZTNA or Zero Trust Network Access. In few minutes, Johan Duresma, our senior product manager, will be joining me talking about configuring access control in Access Server as well. Before I start, you can ask your questions at any time. Please type it in the Q&A box, and I have a couple of my colleagues are on standby to answer these questions as we go. At the end of the session, I open the floor for the remaining questions, and we can answer any remaining questions at that time as well. Today, we're going to give you a lot of information, and it may sound or look very complicated, but don't worry about it. It's not as complicated as it looks like. We're here to help you. You can ask for a one-on-one demo with one of our sales engineers. This is highly recommended for any businesses that they're looking to implement any of our products. So in order to ask for the demo or request for demo, you go to our website, openvpn.net, and then click on request demo, this button on the upper right corner. And then you enter your information so we can get in touch with you, and we set up a time that is convenient for you, and we're going to do a one-on-one demo based on your inquiries or your use cases or your environment. And we can answer any specific questions you may have regarding Access Server or any other products that we have. So this is highly recommended if you're looking to implement Access Server in your environment and you have very specific type of questions or use cases that need to be addressed. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and start. As I said earlier, our focus is going to be how to configure Access Server for ZTNA to create a zero trust network access environment in our business. Before we start, I'd like to do a quick introduction about the company, as some of you may not be familiar with our company. OpenVPN is a leading global private networking and cybersecurity company that basically enables organizations to really safeguard their networks, their assets in a dynamic and cost-effective way. Our products are very scalable. You can scale them up or down with a few clicks. We have two main products, Cloud Connexo, formerly known as OpenVPN Cloud. It's a managed solution. With Cloud Connexo, your business gets a cloud delivered service that integrates virtual networking and critical security functions in a secure overlay network that's really easy to deploy and manage. And our other product is the OpenVPN Access Server, which is our focus today. So what is our Access Server? Access Server is our self-hosted VPN solution. Access Server make it very simple for a quick deployment of a secure remote access and site-to-site solution with a web-based administration interface and a built-in OpenVPN Connect app distribution. In a few minutes, I'm going to log into the admin UI and you'll see the admin interface or administration interface. With this all-in-one solution, you can protect your business data communications, you can secure your IoT resources or devices, you can implement access control and network segmentation and provide encrypted remote access to on-premise, hybrid, and public cloud resources. Some of the features of Access Server, as you can see on the screen, admin friendly. It's really easy to install, set up, and manage through an easy to use admin portal. Again, you're going to see the admin portal in a minute. Flexible deployment options and availability on cloud marketplaces. You can find Access Server on most major cloud marketplaces such as AWS, Azure, DigitalOcean, and so on. It does support for both site-to-site and remote access virtual networking. Also, clients bundled with connection profile is available for quick install and connectivity. Again, I'm going to show you that in a second. and secure authentication methods such as PAM, Radius, LDAP, SAML, or even a custom method. Now, one nice thing about this product is that multiple authentication method can be used at the same time. So you can use the local authentication method with SAML or LDAP or vice versa. So you can use multiple authentication method, and we're going to look at how to configure that in a second again. Access Server delivers the most critical features and functions you need to connect and protect your network. Cloud networks and remote users or mobile workforces give businesses an unmatched speed and flexibility, but at the same time, it requires another layer of security. Giving your remote workers or remote employees online resources and application access basically introduces your business to a very complex network security issues. Secure private access to online services is critical for every business, as it doesn't matter what size your business is. With Access Server, you can be very confident that your employees have secure internet access from wherever they happen to be working from. And the last thing is Internet of Things. Now they're everywhere and increasing your network's attack surface. So by configuring the right and appropriate security functions in Access Server, you can decrease your network's attack surface. Obviously, our focus today is how to configure this product for ZTNA. So enforcing zero trust access is a serious part of a security program. These days, everybody's thinking about implementing some sort of ZTNA within their network. So Access Server not only gives you or gives your business the ability to create a secure virtualized network, but also can protect remote users that are using their home or public Wi-Fi networks, such as coffee shop or airports, or even SaaS applications. We provide all the tools that are necessary for building a strong zero trust network to block or significantly mitigate attacks. So how we do this? First of all, you never trust connections based only on perimeter defenses. We suggest identity-driven authentication policies, then enforce secure connections for specific application resources. Then classify and isolate specific application resources so they can only be accessed through your secure private network, regardless of the location. You should enable identity-based access control through authenticators such as Google Authenticator, as well as LDAP, SAML, Radius, and so on. Now, one note here, or one side note, Access Server also support identity as a service providers like JumpCloud. Then you maintain control over approved internet destinations to protect your users from unknowingly becoming a risk. You can route all clients' internet traffic through a secure private connection, then through a security appliance to enforce destination policies and protect against malware and zero-day threats and so on. And the last thing I'm going to mention here, you can also define access control based on user groups. Create access control lists or ACLs that limit access to only those resources required for every group. Then you can map roles and departments to ACLs and enforce those at the network level. Now, that being said, there are some questions that you need to ask before implementing any type of security policies, especially since we're talking about zero trust network access. Those questions can be something like the ones that we have on the screen right now. Who's connecting? Where they're going? And what policy or policies need to be enforced? Obviously, there are many other steps involved between each of these phases. But one thing you can remember is that it's not about the network route, but rather if the access and a path is allowed or not. If access is not allowed, then the destination cannot even be seen. So we're getting to the part here that we're going to look at the admin UI and some of the things that I just mentioned. So as you can see, I'm on the admin login page and I'm going to log in to the web interface. Let me type username and password here. And here we go. We are logged in to our administration web interface. This is where most of our configuration can happen. One of the things that I mentioned earlier, clients can be bundled with connection profiles for quick install and connectivity when it comes to the user. So in order to do that, you can just expand users, go to user profile, choose the user you want, and click on the new profile. This is where you can download the profile and send it to them. Now, another option that the user have, they can log into the portal as themselves with their username and password and download the clients from there. I'm going to show you that in a second when I'm talking about the authentication. But as you can see, the profile was downloaded here, and we can send that to the user so they can run it on their computer and get connected automatically. Another thing that I'm going to show you here is the routing. Now, routing, it can be set at the VPN level or access server level. It can be set as user level or group level. So if I expand configuration and go to VPN settings, you can see here the routing. This part is going to be explained in details in a few minutes by Johan, but I'm just going to basically touch on this subject here very quickly. So you can choose either using NAT or routing and type your subnets in this box here. Now, this is at the VPN level. Now, if I want to do this at the user level, if I expand my users and go to user permissions, for example, let me choose Amy. If I click on more settings here, I can go ahead and set access control for Amy, just the user. Now, the same thing can happen or set at the group level. So if I go to group permissions, for example, I'm going to choose my accounting group, expand that with more settings, and if I scroll down, you can see the access control is here. So if I select yes, I can configure the access control based on the group. So again, this can happen in 3 levels. You can do it on a VPN level, you can do it in user level or group level. It really depends on what type of security policy you want to implement, and you choose the appropriate one. Now, when it comes to authentication, OpenVPN Access Server supports several robust authentication systems. Whether you manage it from the admin web UI or authenticate against a third-party system, these authentication methods are available to you. So as you can see on the screen, these systems or methods are local, which is the Access Server's authentication system using a SQLite 3 database to store user properties and credentials with management handled through this web UI. Then we got PAM, Linux system that requires management in the console or an SSH session on the OS itself. Then we got Radius. Access Server can authenticate against Radius server once you configure it. Then the LDAP, again, you can configure LDAP for configurations such as Windows Active Directory. SAML can be configured with your identity providers, and then PAS. So if you see here, SAML is set up as a default authentication system for this access server. We are using one login as identity provider, and I configure that here. So we are using SAML as default authentication system. If you remember a few minutes ago, I mentioned that you can use multiple authentication system or methods in the access server. So even though our default authentication method is SAML, if I go to users, I can set up the authentication level at the user level too. For example, here on Amy, if I click on more settings, you can see the authentication method is set up at the group level, which her group is a local authentication. So let's look at another user, for example, Mark. If I click on more settings, you can see Mark is set as a local. So we're using one login as our identity provider. So we may have some users that they're not listed here, but they're on our servers, such as, like, for example, we have one login here. If you see, I got Kevin and Ryan and Anya here. They're not listed on the access server. Now, these guys, they can log in the same way because we configured our access server for SAML. If they want to log in, they can just click on sign in via SAML, and then they're going to type their username. Oops, let me correct this. and then they're typing their password, and they can log in to the portal. From here, for example, Ryan can download the Connect app with her profile bundle with his profile to his computer so he can connect. So that's basically how users, even the local users, they can use the same way to download their profile. So there are two ways for the users to get their clients bundled with connection profile. Either they can log into the user portal like I did here and download it themselves, or administrator can download it from the admin UI and send it to them by clicking on the new profile and add the profile for them, or send the profile for them. So let's go back to the slides, and this is the part that I'm gonna ask Johan to join us and talk about the access control. Johan Durisma is our senior product manager, and Johan, please take it away.
I'm Johan Durisma, Senior Product Manager of OpenVPN Access Server, and I'm here to give you a very quick primer on access control on OpenVPN Access Server. So let's briefly explain the concept of access control. In this example, the user on the left, connected to the access server in the middle, would have access only to network resource 1 on the right. From the very first release of OpenVPN Access Server, it has had the ability to define exactly which network devices each individual user was allowed to access. In contrast, some other simpler VPN solutions would just grant every VPN user access to the whole network, so basically all the resources on the right in this example, and then any further controls were based on credentials or other measures. In the past few years, the term ZTNA has become quite popular. The basic tenet of ZTNA, or Zero Trust Network Access, is to give only the required access to resources to each individual user and device. This is what our products do. Full tunnel and split tunnel redirection are two concepts of how network traffic from a user device is handled when it has to transport data through a secure VPN tunnel. In the example on the left, the user device is connected to the VPN server, and all network requests must go through the VPN server. In typical situations on Access Server, this results in network requests of the user device appearing to come from the Access Server private or public IP address. This makes firewall whitelisting of online applications pretty easy. On the right, however, we have split tunnel redirection, where only certain network resources have to be reached through the VPN server, and other network requests just go through the network and the internet as usual. The model on the right is typically used to grant secure access to specific protected network resources with strict access control. Before we dive into a practical example, let's look at the basic operating principle of access control on OpenVPN Access Server, particularly in the case of split tunnel. The access works additive, meaning you start out with no access at all and you build up from there. There are 3 layers in which access can be granted. There is the global layer, the group layer, and the user layer. Each successive layer allows you to define access rules, and these are added up to derive what the user has access to. So let's look at this in a practical example. Here we have 2 users that need access to specific resources. Both of them may have access to resource 1 with IP 10.0.0.1, but only user B may have access to resource 2 with IP 10.0.0.2. So in our example, all users may have access to resource 1, so this can be a global access control rule. On top of that, we grant only user B access to resource 2. Let's see how this is done in Access Server. In the web-based admin interface of the Access Server, you can go to Configuration and then VPN Settings page. Here in the section titled Routing, we can configure the global access control. By setting the first option to Yes using NAT, we are telling the Access Server that all groups and users may have access to resource 1, IP 10.0.0.1. The /32 you see here means that we want just this one IP address. This is CIDR address formatting, which will be familiar to most network administrators. And NAT means Network Address Translation, which makes implementation of our solution easier as no additional routing in your network will be required. Next, we go to User Management and then User Permissions. We locate the user B and click on the pencil icon under More Settings for this user. This expands the available options for that user. In the section titled Access Control, you can add resource 2 with IP 10.0.0.2. Again, with the /32 to indicate we want just this one IP. And again, access is granted using NAT for ease of implementation. And that's it. Now the practical example of access control has been implemented. On the global level, we have granted access to 10.0.0.1 to all users and groups on the access server, and only user B has access to 10.0.0.2. Let's do one more practical example that involves groups. Let's look at this example a little closer. We have defined a group alpha that has access only to resource 1 at 192.168.1.0.0.1. Any user that is assigned to group alpha will inherit that access to resource 1. Group beta has access only to resource 2 at 10.0.0.1. Any user that is assigned to group beta will inherit that access to resource 2. So basically, we have two groups that each have different access control rules, and users get access to those resources based on their group membership. At the bottom, we are going to make an exception for user A, who is part of group alpha. On top of the access he inherits from group alpha, which is resource 1, he also needs access to resource 2, which in our example is normally only accessible for members of group beta. But we make an exception for just this one user so that we can get access to resource 1 via his group membership and access to resource 2 because we give this specific user that additional access. So let's see how to do this in Access Server. We first have to start out by getting rid of any global access control rules. So we go to Configuration, VPN Settings page again. This time we set the first option to No. This tells the Access Server that we don't want to grant any global access, but that we want to do this on a group or user level, which allows us to be more granular in our access control. Then we go to Group Permissions and set up the permissions for the group alpha. We locate group alpha and click on the pencil icon under More Settings to see more configuration options. The access control option must be set to Yes, and then we can give group alpha access to resource 1, which is at 192.168.1.0.0.1. Now, all users that are a member of group alpha will be able to access this resource. Now we configure access for group beta. We give group beta access to resource 2 at 10.0.0.1. This will give access to this resource to all users that are a member of group beta. Now we assign a user A to group alpha. This is done under user permissions, where the group can be selected in the group dropdown. And finally, we will go into the More Settings portion for user A, so that we can grant him access to one more resource on top of the one he inherits from group alpha. This is the exception we spoke of in the overview earlier. User A will be able to access resource 1 because he inherits this from group alpha, and he will be able to access resource 2 because we will specifically grant this user that additional access. Other users assigned to group alpha will not be able to access that second resource unless you also give those users that additional access. So in conclusion, we have now achieved this particular practical example with groups. That concludes this brief presentation. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Johan. That was very informative. So let's continue. We're going to look at a couple of more different scenarios in order to implement ZTNA within your network. The very first one I want to talk about here right now is a secure internet access. Every business understands the need for making internet security a high priority. OpenVPN Access Server is so affordable and scalable that basically gives businesses of all sizes, it doesn't matter what size your business is, the ability to launch a VPN server and provide security, encryption, and reliability. So basically, when a remote employees connect from their home networks or unsecured public Wi-Fi or any other networks which are outside of your ability to secure, all they need is a connection through the access server. Once their client authenticates, their encrypted traffic can flow privately through the access server tunnel. This can be set up very quickly and admin web UI by turning split tunneling off and routing all internet or all client internet traffic through the VPN. So if I want to look at that, let's go back to admin portal. And if I expand the configuration, go to VPN settings, scroll down here on the routing, you can see there is an option that says, should client internet traffic be routed through the VPN? So if I want to do this, I just toggle the switch. Once done, then I can go ahead, click on Save Settings, and then update running server. Now, for the clients that connected to the access server, you as an administrator can choose to push DNS servers to clients, protecting against the threats of DNS hijacking. So in order to do that, you can see here under DNS settings, you have an option that says pushing DNS servers to client is optional, but have client use the same DNS server as the access server. So if you want to push the DNS to the client, you just toggle the switch to yes. So basically, clients will use the same DNS server as the access server or can be directed to specifically defined servers, which is, you can configure it here. Have clients use a specific DNS server. If you toggle the switch to yes, you can enter the DNS server's information here. Again, once you're done with this, you can just go ahead, click on Save Settings at the bottom of the page and update running servers. So let's go back to these slides again, and we're going to look at the next scenario, which is securing access to SaaS application. You can also have more control over who can connect, whether it's employees, vendors, or partners to your SaaS applications, such as Salesforce, for example. You're ensuring the security of your SaaS applications with private network access through the access server this way. Now, if you look at this slide, basically we're creating an environment where all access to the SaaS service or SaaS application is routed through the access server, while all other internet traffics, they're going outside of the access server. They're not going through. This way, we're lowering our bandwidth requirement. Now, you can configure the access server to tunnel all traffic, as I mentioned a couple minutes ago. So why we're doing this, basically, this helps you to overcome the challenge of maintaining a list of ever-changing IP addresses by whitelisting SaaS access using the single public IP address of your access server. Just imagine you have remote users all over the places, their IP addresses changes all the time. So whitelisting their IP addresses, it's impossible. This way, you just whitelist one IP address. Now, this enables secure access to the SaaS environment for all users by getting the whitelisted IP address. Again, remember, the concept of zero trust network access is zero trust. We don't trust anything and anybody. This way, we have a secure connection to our SaaS application. You can also grant a secure SaaS access only to those job roles or teams or users that requires to have access to it. So with the user and group access control list in Access Server Admin Web UI, basically you can really easily create the specific access according to roles, as Johan explained it a few minutes ago. And you're basically up-leveling protection through a secure virtualized network and reducing your attack surface by creating a strong or a stronger access controls for every SaaS applications. So in order to accomplish this, two things needs to happen. First, you need to whitelist your IP address. I'm using Salesforce as an example. I'm looking at their website. They have an instruction how to whitelist my IP address. So you follow the instructions and you whitelist your IP address. Second, you need to find the SaaS application or SaaS provider's public IP address. Again, I'm looking at Salesforce, for example. On their website, they have published IP addresses based on regions. So I find the IP address is appropriate for me based on my region. And then I'm going to go to my access server, go to VPN settings, and under routing, I'm going to enter that subnet in here. Once on, again, I'm going to save settings and update running. After this, if any of my users want to connect to my Salesforce, they have to go through the access server. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to. So let's go ahead and test this. Let me bring up the Salesforce. This is a Salesforce login page. I'm going to log in with my username and my password. And as you can see, I'm not able to log in. My login was refused. So I'm going to bring up the Connect app. Here we go. This is my Connect app. I'm going to connect with Dave's profile, one of the users on the Access server. Okay, Access server is connected now. Now let's go ahead and type the password here again. And voila, as you can see, I'm able to log into Salesforce. So I have to be connected to the Access server to connect or log into my Salesforce. So basically, we created another layer of security when it comes to our SaaS application. So let's go ahead, log off here, and then go back to the slides. The last scenario I'm going to talk about is the post-auth script. The post-auth programming in OpenVPN Access Server gives you the ability to extend the possibilities of the Access Server to authenticate against a source of credentials. So user signs in with a VPN client or a client web UI. They successfully authenticate with their username and password. Then the post-auth script runs. That's why we call it post-auth, is after authentication. So the post-auth script itself is a text file in a Python language, and I'm going to show you that in a second. With post-auth, you can do all sorts of interesting things, like automating assigning users to a group based on a specific criteria, implementing a custom authentication system, adding extra filters to the login process, or checking the user's device hardware address. And that's what we're going to look here today. So you can create a hardware address checking script to enhance the security of your authentication by only allowing users with registered MAC addresses or UUID strings to connect to the VPN server successfully. How do you access these post-auth scripts? Very simple. I'm going to show you the steps. Basically, you need to go to our website. Then click on the search, and here type post-auth. And then the very first search result is post-auth programming notes and examples. So when you click on this, there is an explanation about post-authentication scripts, and then there are some examples like LDAP group mapping, radius, SAML, and so on. The one that I'm looking here for this scenario is the hardware address checking script. So if I click on this, again, here it's going to give me an introduction about this script, and it's going to show me what this script does and how can I install it on my Access server. Now, if you need to configure or reconfigure the script, if you want to do that, you can just click on this link here and you download the script here. If I double click that, open it, as you can see, is a text file in a Python, and you can reconfigure it and customize it as you see fit. If not, you can just leave it as default. Now, in order to run this script on your Access server, you need to have an SSH session going on. So let me bring up my command, and as you can see, I have an SSH session going here. So let me do it side by side so we can see the commands here as well as the SSH session. First thing first, let me elevate the permissions to root. First, we're going to retrieve the files directly on our server. And in order to do that, we need to run this wget command. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to run it on my access server. It is done. Once done, then we can load this script and reload the access server by running these 3 commands here. So again, run these. So as you can see, it's done and the access server is reloaded. So this is all I need to do. Now, if you make any alteration or customizing the script, the file, the mac.py I just downloaded earlier and showed you, then you need to use the same commands to reload the new version of the script into the configuration database and then reload the access server configuration again. So this is the way this is how you run the script on your access server. Now, what happens when you do this? Well, from the user perspective, okay, the new user sign in with valid credentials. Obviously, they are new users, so the MAC address isn't in your database or in Access Server's user property database. So Access Server automatically registers and stores the MAC and or UUID in the user properties database. And then the next time the user signs in, the MAC or UUID must match the value that is in the user properties. Otherwise, the connection is being refused. Now, one side note here is that really depends on what type of clients the users are using in order to get the MAC address or UUID. If they're using an older version of clients, OpenVPN 2 client, that client sends only MAC addresses. But if they're using the newer version, OpenVPN 3 based clients, the clients may send UUID. So both options are unique identifiers for the device, and our post-auth script accepts and it stores either one of them. So each time the client attempts to connect, it must basically offer the same strings to succeed. As a summary here, we look at some of the configuration suggestion in order to configure the access server for ZTNA. Again, we look at the how to turn on the global access to private resources off and configure access to groups and user level, as Johan showed us. We look at the post-auth scripts. I showed you how to use the post-auth with the register MAC address or UUID. And, obviously we kind of touched on the flexibility of post-auth to integrate with other external systems that can provide information on device posture. Now, you can treat trusted SaaS application as private. We look at that, how we can tunnel that traffic through the access server, even if the split tunnel is on. And then for security of the remaining or non-trusted internet traffic, you can use a third-party secure web gateway service in tandem, or turning the split tunnel off and tunnel all traffic to an on-prem or cloud internet security solutions. So again, these are some of the suggestions that we did with the access server. There are a lot more can be done. I'm going back to recommending using or taking advantage of the requesting demo. Again, with the request demo, we can give you a one-on-one attention and answer any specific questions that you have, especially within your environment or your use cases. Again, you can go to our website, openvpn.net, click on request demo, and type your information here so we can get in touch with you. One last thing I'm going to show you here, how to install Access Server for free and use the 2 free connection. So if you go to our website, again, you can click on Get Started or Get Started for free here, and you're going to get to a page like this that you can create your account. Just type your email address, choose a password, and sign up. Once you sign up, you get access to the Access Server portal. There is a quick start guide here that it basically walks you through how to install or navigate through this portal, and then get Access Server. We have software packages for different Linux distributions, cloud providers and virtual appliances. You can download the software package here. And if you go to license keys, you can use subscription recommended. And when it comes to buy subscriptions, choose the flexible subscription, proceed with subscription, and then you can use the 2 free connections. With the 2 free connections, you get the full feature access server that you can test in your environment or play around with it and learn more about it. We don't even ask for credit card. If you choose 2, you can click on create and you create your subscription keys that you can install it on your access server. Again, this is a very good way of testing the product and learning about it before you implement it in your environment. And then when you're ready, you can just come here and upgrade your subscription to a number of the users that you would like. You choose your billing monthly or annually, and then you enter your information or credit card information for the payments. So that's basically brings us to the end of our webinar, and I would like to open the floor for any remaining questions that you may have. Please go ahead and ask any questions you have. Thank you.